We left the United States in a brand new B-17 heading for England on September the 19th of 1944. And after a series of overnight stays en route, as previously mentioned, we landed in England on September the 24th. We turned in the plane and went to a replacement depot and were later on reassigned to go on to the 15th Air Force in Italy. And we arrived there on October the 13th of 1944. The pilot and the navigator flew the first several missions with other experienced crews, and I flew my first mission on November the 4th with an experienced pilot and crew. And that was a bombing raid on Regensburg, Germany, which the flight took 8 hours. When we first got to our base, the rules for combat crews were that you would fly 50 missions and then you'd be rotated back to the States. You got credit for one mission if it was a short flight, and for 2 missions if it exceeded a certain length of time and distance. This would have been a credit for two missions. But within 4 or 5 days after our arrival, they changed the ground rules, and you flew 35 missions regardless of length before being reassigned. I ended up, of course, flying 34 missions and was called and briefed for the 35th one on several occasions near the war's end, but in each case it was called off either because it was all tactical bombing required, or the weather was bad and they didn't want to risk, or they didn't need our help. Mm-hmm. Some of the missions that might be worth mentioning, my third flight was to Salzburg, Germany. It was an alternate target, the first one being overcast, covered by clouds, and we made 2 bomb runs. For some reason we couldn't drop on the first run. There was no flak, and so there was no great problem. On the next mission, which took us to Vienna, Eddie Davenport, who was a waist gunner, was injured by some flying flak and got a scratch on his forehead and received the Purple Heart. On the 17th of December, we went to Bleckhammer, Germany, to bomb a synthetic oil refinery. There was very inaccurate but heavy flak, and our number 3 engine was apparently hit by some shrapnel, and so we had to feather the engine and come home on 3.
Which means?
In feathering an engine, you turn the propeller blade perpendicular to the air stream so that it reduces drag, which you would have otherwise by a turning prop that had no power. On the 31st of January, we went to Moosbierbaum, Austria, and there again we were hit by flak, which caused us to feather the number 2 engine as we came off the bomb.
Could you feel it hit the plane, or?
No, when we talk about the flak, they put up shells, either 88s or 105s, and they had a timer to implode or explode from the inside, and that blew all of the outer casing into fine or small pieces, which flew in every which direction.
Sure.
And it was at such velocity that it would hit something and tear through it.
Okay. Could you feel the percussion from the flak explode?
No, I never did. You could see it.
Okay.
You could see
like
the puffs of smoke. If it was an 88 shell, it was black smoke. If it was a 105 millimeter shell, it was white smoke.
Oh, okay.
And the white, of course, the 105s were used when you were up higher.
Okay.
Because it would reach a higher altitude. On the 16th of February, we went to Hall, Austria, which was an alternative target for Lechfeld, Austria, Hall being right outside of Innsbruck. And this was, as I say, an alternate target, and as we came in at our assigned altitude, we noted that there was a group of B-24s directly over the overhead coming on a different route, but they were going to cross over the top of us. And in fact, they dropped their bombs while we were on the bomb run also. And the bombs came through our squadron. The pilot was my assistant, danced our plane in effect, picking up one wing and then the other to try to avoid what we could see. And the fellow named Solowitz and his crew, who were flying on our wing, were hit by a bomb which exploded, and the plane blew up and there were no parachutes seen, so no one survived that.
Now you had a window right above you, right?
Yes.
And you could,
actually
see it come
yeah,
down?
Yeah. Yes.
Do you still remember that? Do you remember that? Do you remember vividly that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah?
You would cringe a little when you saw something like that, whether it be that or when the flak did get close, even though it wasn't close enough to rock your plane. Or, as I said, fortunately, we had a couple instances where engines were knocked out, but you could still fly easily on 3. And several of the fellows did get Purple Hearts, and that was from, fortunately there were minor injuries in all cases. On the 25th of February, we went to Linz, Austria, which is down the Danube from Vienna. And it was on that flight that we noticed, after very heavy flak at both Innsbruck, or at Linz and Vienna and Munich. Those were the most heavily defended targets that we went to. A group behind us was apparently really hit by the flak, and we saw 3 ships on fire. One of them, as we watched them, we were on our rally route, you could see a parachute pop out of the tail gunner's position. The tail gunner's exit was a small hatch that just about a person could get through. He must have hit the ripcord while he was still in the plane, and so the chute pulled out and pulled open and put tremendous pressure, and eventually we saw a body attached to the chute pull out of the plane. I'm sure the person was dead. If not, I don't think he was in very good shape. We continued our missions through February. On the 28th, when we went to a short flight to Verona, Italy, we had a piece of flak go through our right aileron, and we had a right aileron trim tab, and one piece of flak came up through the bomb bay doors, and Bozeman, who was the other waist gunner, was slightly injured and did get a Purple Heart for that. Throughout all of this, we had no contact with German fighters. On the rare occasion, 1 or 2 would come up to observe us, but would stay out of range of the machine guns on our ships.
Do you know what they were? 109s or?
No, 109s and 88s, I think, Junker 88s.
Mm-hmm.
But on the whole, there was no contact with jets or with enemy fighters. There was flak in the intensity depending upon the targets we went to. On the 22nd of March, we went to an oil refinery out in the middle of nowhere at a place called Ruland, Germany. It was intense flak. It was, at that point, the longest mission we had flown. The flight itself lasted 9 hours and 45 minutes from takeoff to landing. It was on that mission that, for some reason, either we rallied off the target the wrong way or the rest of the group did, and we were attacked by planes that came in at a speed we had never seen before. They were the first jets we had ever seen. The top turret gunner standing behind us said it looks like, for the first time, our fighter planes are coming with us over the target. It had been the rule that the fighters would leave after we did, catch up to us near the target zone, stay with us for protection against other fighters, and then they would back off while we went over the target and took the flak, and then they'd pick us up again and escort us for a short time, and then they'd have to leave because of fuel conditions and fly on home. He thought they were P-51s coming in over the target. Well, in fact, they were German jets, and they made 2 passes at us, and they shot down 5. Well, as it turns out, 2 of our planes got back, we and another one. Eventually, most everybody got back. Some made it to Russian lines. Some got to Yugoslavia, where they were helped, and but it was a little hairy for a while. Trying to think of the names of the people. A fellow named Cobb and his crew, Robinson and his crew, and Bates and his crew all made it to the Russian lines. The fellow that was flying lead that day was a fellow whose nickname was Deacon, and his name was Deacon Dent. And he took a hit on one of his engines, and it was leaking oil all over the fuselage, and he could not maintain altitude. So we, along with the other plane that had not been hit, stayed with him on the return, going down until he got down to about 10,000 feet. And we just, on the intercom, or on our radio, told him we could not afford to stay with him any longer. We couldn't do him any good. It looked like we were getting close, I think, to the southern part towards Italy, so that he had a good chance to make it somewhere, which he did make it. He made it to the to Yugoslavia area, and his crew got back.
Were you friends with this crew?
Yes,
You knew
yes.
who it was going down.
Oh yes, yes. We lived in a each squadron had a row of tents, and so we were closely acquainted with and friends with all of these people on this.
What kind of feeling is that when
Well,
you're bringing your buddies down and you don't know what their fate's going to be?
Well, you're really too busy at the time to get much feelings.
Yeah.
You're sorry that it happens, but there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah. Do you think about it once you get back? Wonder what's
Oh
happening?
yeah, well, after each mission, we were taken to the headquarters area for debriefing, and we would explain everything we saw, and so on. And at that point, you started to get a little sad with what had gone on. 2 days later, as I said before, we flew every other day usually. 2 days later, we were scheduled to go to Berlin, Germany, which turned out to be the longest mission in terms of miles flown in the European theater during the war. And this was done, we were told, so that the general of the 15th Air Force could brag to the general of the 8th Air Force that we had flown the longer missions. This mission only took 8 hours and 40 minutes, which was an hour less than the 2 days earlier, but it was further in miles. There again, we encountered jets. They only made 1 pass, but they shot down a fellow again who was flying on our wing. And I cannot recall if they got back safely eventually, but I think they did. We were fortunate because the battle lines were collapsing and closing in, and so therefore it wasn't too far to get to Russian lines.
Oh, these jets, they were a marked increase in speed. I mean, you
yes.
could visually tell that this was a new breed.
Well, our bombers would fly about 150, 60 miles an hour. Our fighters would maybe fly a couple hundred miles an hour. These jets were 300, 400 miles an hour or faster. So all of the training that the machine gunners had, they couldn't keep up with them. They couldn't keep up with them. Although we did get credit, our top turret gunner got credit at the Ruhlen raid for we thought he shot down a jet. Officially, they said they gave him credit for a half a jet that somebody else might have shot, also got a credit for a half.